track like.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Fight Back interview. We love bringing these interviews to you because they focus on the people, their passions, their interests, their stories, and really what keeps driving our industry forward. But we could not do these interviews without awesome sponsors. Our sponsor for this video series is Somos. Somos is a trusted steward of telephone number and identity data that keeps critical communications running globally. By managing and protecting billions of numbers that power calls, texts, and essential services, Somos operates at the center of the telecom ecosystem. By combining telecom and identity data with real-time analytics, Somos helps financial institutions and fintechs verify who's truly behind a phone number or digital interaction. While many fraud solutions respond only after losses occur, Somos enables organizations to detect and stop scams, impersonation, and account takeovers before the fraud can happen. We're so thankful for their support. And with that said, let's get into it. All right, delighted to have Miguel Nivarro for our next Fight Back interview. Miguel and I met actually fairly recently, and it's a small fraud fighting world, so it's always exciting to meet new people in the industry, and especially folks with the energy and enthusiasm that Miguel has. So I am super pumped to talk to him today, but as much as I know about him, you folks may not. So Miguel, can you just start with a brief intro of yourself, where you work and what you do?
Sure thing. So again, PJ, thank you so much for having me. Absolutely honored to be back and, now participating in your Fight Back interview. Again, thank you so much for having me. So for folks that don't know me, Miguel Navarro here. I'm as my LinkedIn title would show it, I'm a innovator, patented inventor, seasoned digital leader, and a fraud fighter. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is fraud fighting. And, I'd say today, where I work at KeyBank today as the head of applied emerging technologies. Prior to that, I was the head of client identity verification and authentication. And then prior to that, I was the head of conversational AI technology. And then now, really peeling back the onion, I was in TD Bank prior to KeyBank. I was the head of voice and emerging platforms. And then I did a stint as a head of mobile. And then prior to that, I was in the state of New Jersey judiciary, where I literally built the entire mobile platform ecosystem that they had there. We literally went from zero, absolutely no mobile apps to, I think we had 16, but by the time I left, it was 16 in production. It was internal and external mobile apps. I've started a business. I created mobile apps. That's kind of where the whole mobile app piece came about. I grew up in Philippines. I got kind of going backwards here. Tell me when to stop.
Yeah,
PJ.
and I'm gonna get it. Yeah, because you could say, "Tell me about yourself," and that's a loaded question if you really go back. And I do want to go back a little bit further, but a couple things you mentioned there, the head of emerging technologies and platforms. That's super interesting, especially as it relates to fraud fighting, because that's where so much activity and conversations and scamming and fraud and detection is going, right? Understanding these things. So I do want to get into that. But to your point, I'd love to know, I always like to know how people get involved in fraud fighting, but your story, I think, is particularly interesting. And you can go back to life in the Philippines, and you can fast forward as quickly as you'd like. But I know when I met you, beyond your enthusiasm and personality, which is just engaging and fun to be around, I think your story is really interesting. And that's what we like to bring to life here. So yeah, love for you to dive into as much as you like.
Oh, thanks so much, PJ. So I'd say how I started out in, fraud fighting was literally on the other side of the fence. So when we were growing up in the Philippines, we weren't necessarily the richest families. As a matter of fact, my family and I started, very humble. So I would say, my parents worked very hard, but, as a kid and you're growing up, you're just thinking, oh, I want more things, etc. So where people kind of waited and just kind of asked people for things, I'm a doer. It's just it's what I do, right? So I did what I did to like make the money that I made like while I was there. And I did that at a very young age, like, and, prior to that, right, like going back, my brother was like a huge inspiration for me. His name's Ramon. Shout out to him. He was the first person that taught me programming, right? Like, so he taught me Turbo Pascal. It's a old assembly language. We created games. We created knockoff like games, right? And it's just like we started like selling it, etc. And I started seeing like the wonder of technology, like through that, right? Like, so through productive use, I was just kind of like doing that. And then, like certain, you start becoming creative, and all of a sudden, like you start going into the world of, let's just call it adversarial, and it's zombie rules, right? Like you didn't need to be the smartest guy. You just needed to be the guy who built the thing, so let's just say I became very good at that, and like from there, like it initially started as like, oh, like I wasn't necessarily thinking about it. Towards the end of when I was like living in the Philippines, like, so it was around like 17 years old, I started like realizing really like how bad, right? Like call it like cybercrime, scamming, etc. Like has been like in that country. So, one of like the things that ended up happening, was fortunate enough that my mom had moved to the United States because she was working for the United Nations at the time, and I took the opportunity to kind of like uproot myself, just because I just thought, that's a great opportunity to start over, and coming in from that, right, like going into kind of just like the stuff that I've seen, and then going into like the U.S. and like it's definitely a easier life. There are certain aspects in Philippines, especially towards the later part of our lives. It's like funny because my father did very well, and we were starting to live like a great life. And like when we moved to the U.S. in the Philippines, at one point we had like nannies, like because my father started doing really well. When we moved to the U.S., right, it kind of went back to, hey, now you have to start doing your own laundry again, which is pretty funny. So going back into that and kind of like analyzing, okay, like what it means to be poor, in a third world country, and like poor here, it's very different. That's one of the things I tell people. It's like, I'd rather be poor in the United States than be poor in the Philippines. But the most important thing, right, like, is there's not really a lot of education on just like how bad the world could be. It just seems like there's this like underbelly that's not necessarily really seen, wherein in Philippines, like it's just kind of like, it exists. So when I started like going into tech, I really wanted to start using a lot of my experience for good, because it was just like to the point where I just saw the scale so uneven that there's just like so many bad people, and there's not really a lot of people like trying to even that out. There's a bunch of like agencies and projects and all of these different things that kind of like lead towards, hey, let's go fight back, but it's so disjointed, and like it just at that time it just didn't feel enough. So I wanted to make sure that hey, I started contributing where I can, when I can. So when we started going into my days when I was in TD, when I was essentially running innovation there, when I was the head of voice and emerging platforms, when the opportunity came to start like really using some of the creativity stuff that I know to be able to fight fraudsters, there's this a particular event that comes to mind. It was like around like 2020. So around 2020, there's this very significant event where Russia essentially like sends a whole bunch of bots to like shut down online account opening. And I remember like one of like the things that I did in TD was, and I'm not going to go specifically into details, but one of the things that we did in TD was like I was running a whole bunch of digital marketing tools, and we turned that the digital marketing tools that we were running into a fraud fighting tool. So to me, one of like the things that taste that I kind of got there, right, was just like, oh, finally, I'm able to impact millions of people to help them do fraud prevention. So when I got that taste, right, I was just like, oh my gosh, like how can I like do this more? How can I scale this? So now, like fast forward to today, it's part of like the biggest reasons why, like when we're talking about all of these like emerging technologies, you brought it up, right? It's almost like fraudsters are using AI, fraudsters are using deepfakes, fraudsters are doing all of these things. It's still zombie rules, right? Except now it's reverse. Now, like as a fraud fighter, I want to be able to run faster than the fraudsters. But the problem is fraudsters seem to run faster than us. So to me, I'm trying to like go back to my roots in Philippines into being creative and outsmarting people, right? And being able to like utilize my innovation, my creativity, etc., to be able to devise plans and strategies into things that I can then share with my fraud fighting community, with you, into how we stop deepfakes, how we stop like all of these, like, because again, deepfakes aren't bad, AI isn't bad. As a matter of fact, it's all neutral. It's the person, right, behind the act that actually makes it horrible. So you have all of these people now, like, because I always tell people, like, there's a cheap buy-in now to be a fraudster, and the payout is huge. So now there's a bunch of people that's just like being like all of these like call it like gig fraudsters. They just buy kits in the dark web and start utilizing it because there's already a map out for them that says, hey, it works for these organizations.
Yeah.
So yeah, the thing that I tell people, so then now, like for us, now what I'm trying to do, and again, PJ, you're giving me a platform, you're helping me build it as well, is let's also build our community. Let's build our community of fraud fighters, and yeah, let's freaking fight back.
Yeah, and I like your story for a couple of reasons. Just the real human nature of it. It's like you were a kid. You were in a poor, you were a little poorer, and in a country where apparently being poor there is not the same as being poor here. Your parents were working hard, eventually got to a place where they were doing better, but the way your brain worked was to figure things out however you figured them out. But that's that was all you knew. That was your experience, right? And then you grew and you matured and you moved areas and careers and calling on that for, I would say, two things. One is that driving force to then do good, right? Like to be like, okay, I've seen the dark underbelly. There's more bad stuff than probably a lot of us know. What can I do? And so you have that why, and you also have, I guess, like Liam Neeson, a particular set of skills, right? To actually lead some of this charge, right? Like everyone plays their roles. Your technical acumen is well beyond mine. I do certain things other people don't do as well, but like we all play our role, right? And I
Right.
think it's I think wherever people's passions are and however their skills kind of come to the battlefield is interesting. And I think most importantly is they're showing up now, and they're willing to kind of engage in the fight, and that looks a lot of different ways. And that's why I like understanding where people come from. And it'd probably be interesting to see how along that time you develop such an outgoing personality and such an enthusiasm, right? Because that maybe listen, we're all born certain ways. I can look at my parents and say I act a certain way. I look at my boys and some of the weird things they say, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of me, right? But so some of it's genetically, some of it's life experience, and some of it you just, I guess, you learn over time. I don't know.
Absolutely. It's like nature and nurture, right? Like one of the things that my dad, it's one of my favorite things that I picked up from my dad is that he really believes in the power of doing it together. Like one of the things, you didn't exactly say it this way, but it's how I picked it up, right? It's just like, for the most part, like there's a bunch of people that, hey, like I'm going to get shit done, right? Like it's just like, and I always tell people, listen, if you are the type of person that wants to get stuff done, do it yourself. But if you want to go far, let's do it together.
Yeah.
Because one of the things before that I was like doing by myself, and I was banging my head against the wall on this, was like I was doing it myself. I was doing all of these like little creative projects, and I was like trying to cast a net to like catching like people, right? Like kind of like honey potting like bad guys, etc. And like the impact I was doing was like so small. It was like so small. And then I started working with groups, right? I started working with different people. I started engaging with you and your platform, be able to educate people as well, etc. And that's like the part where I'm just like really embracing it, because to me, I just feel like an individual's effort, right, is an individual's effort. But when you're able to influence a community and now you're in sync and now you're marching together, I feel like you can absolutely change the course of, fate, like especially where like a lot of like fraudsters are just fated to be successful in this, just because if you look at the numbers and the defender's dilemma, it's just like all the numbers and the metrics are really towards the fraudsters. But I
Yeah.
feel like we march together, like we can actually change that.
Yeah, and it can be different levels. Like it just scales more exponentially, and it can be you
Yeah.
lead a team that you inspire and lead. You lead a department, you lead a company, um, and hopefully, we're enablers of that. That's what we want to do, is connect people with resources, yes, but with each other, because it happens here and there, but like not enough, right? And it feels like a small community, but still, even the most experienced fraud fighters don't know a lot of people. So, their day job is fraud fighting. Our day job is connecting them to one another. So on going back some minutes ago, you've had the title either head of emerging technologies or platforms. And like that can, in my head, mean so many things. But when you look at it from a fraud fighting perspective and AI and generative AI and other emerging technologies, what do you think is most relevant to fighting fraud in the bucket of emerging technologies?
So I tell people, right, like being innovative or working in innovation, like, you can look at that as productivity, right? Like, but the reason for me, right, the core as to like why I believe innovation is important is because it's how we keep pace. It's how we keep pace with the fraudsters. Because the thing is, it's just like, for the most part, right, if you think about it from an individual perspective, most people in their corporate jobs will not do something or learn something if it's not attributed to the job that they are doing, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's someone like, if you're an accountant, you're not going to try and learn generative AI if it is not going to impact your accounting job, right? Like, so for
And
the
your
most part,
salary.
exactly, and your salary. So the thing that I tell people is that at least like for me, and the reason why like being human and the emotion piece, right, it becomes extremely important, is because there's a difference between doing something because you're getting paid to do it versus doing something because you believe in it.
Yeah.
So to me, like I feel that, and I think I've been like fortunate enough to have fraud fighters around me like you and other folks that actually are not fraud fighters by trade. They're fraud fighters as a person. So they just believe in fraud fighting and they would do it for free. Right? Like again, like given that all their bills are paid and their mortgages are paid, etc., they'll do it for quote unquote free. But the idea there is like if this is something that they're very passionate about. So to me, it's almost just like, okay, so you have people, right? Like just like any organization, you have your operations people, you have your strategy people, you have your technology people, etc. You have these pillars, right? So the same thing in fraudster world. You have like people that are great in like hitting operations. There are like people that are great in infiltrating organizations, etc. So the thing is, like, you kind of have to combat that, right? Like, so to me, how do we become the mirror side, or how do we mirror, to be able to create a defense on the offense that's about to hit us? So to me, I look at innovation as, not only just playing with the tools that exist, but also changing the mindset in like how we do things. So to me, like when we go into certain tools today, like AI, right, like generative AI, etc., I was learning a lot of the AI stuff earlier on, like, and specifically generative AI, just because generative AI is the more recent one. So when ChatGPT, etc., came about, literally my mindset was, I need to learn this because number one, it's fascinating, but number two, because I know fraudsters are going to do this. Like when the mobile phone like first came out, right? Like again, like especially iPhone, etc. There's not really a lot of like viruses that or malware, etc. that's written for it now. But today, that's changed, right? So if you're in the same mindset, believing that, oh, like nothing's going to hit my iPhone, oh, you're absolutely dead wrong today, right? Like, but and so that's the reason why, like, to me, I feel like being in the innovation space isn't just about tech, but it's also being able to change your mindset at a rapid pace and adapt. And that's kind of like the piece I enjoy giving back, right, to the fraud fighting community. Being able to show them, right, like there is value to being able to adapt very quick, just like the fraudsters, because we have to keep pace.
Yeah. So it's not just like tech savvy people who want to learn AI. It's people who want to explore all the different things that could be done, and people with a mindset of, hey, this isn't my, the job description probably isn't as clear. It's like, hey, play around with this, play around with that, kind of test some different things, and obviously be, technically sound in many ways. And you need areas like that you lead, because like you said, if you're working in a specific, you probably shouldn't be thinking of all these weird ideas and going out and testing things because you have numbers to hit, or whatever it is, right? Like you can't, sometimes you can do things on the side. And actually in past jobs, I really like to write, and I like to think I'm creative. And so I would write like these blogs and articles and work with the marketing team and stuff, and in a role where they're like, why are you doing that? That's not exactly what your job. And I think I did my job too, but like it's one of those things where I was like, oh, I really like doing that. And then I found that through About Fraud, and I can express it in such a different way.
Like,
Where
look at me now, right? Like,
yeah,
it's
some
amazing.
people are like, I don't care about the writing or branding or any of that stuff. They like to stay in their zone, and that's cool too. But I was like, I felt like just like some weird, like, not the right peg fitting in the right hole. And so I think also when you get people who love to play around with emerging technologies or like to do something else, they find kind of their home of like, hey, this is where I feel like I can live, and not just, I don't know. The farthest tech I got was writing SQL queries, which is awful. So like not just like coding, I guess we'll say. Like it was not a good experience. And to that point, I think there's a self-consciousness I used to have, at least, about, oh, I'm not tech savvy enough. Like, right. Like I'm in technology, but I need to know what the data scientists know. And then there might be a data scientist who's like, I need to be able to manage relationships the way somebody else does. And it's like, I think we all need to take a look at ourselves, find where we shine. A great leader answered one of these questions, like, well, what would you advise? Because I always ask people, especially like if you're SVP or whatever you are, like, what do people not know that, might be like, I want to be an executive, and then when you're the executive, you're like, ah, shit, maybe I don't want to be an executive. So, and yeah, I curse on this too. So it's all good. But the one thing was like, know what you're good at, know where you need help, and allow the right people to be brought in to help you, and trust those people. And that's from a leader of a department. But if you look at just the whole movement of what we're trying to do, you need the Miguels, you need the PJs, you need the operations folks, and everyone's got to play their role. And I equate it to sports because that's what I like. But when people do that and they accept it and they buy into it, I think you get this whole thing functioning very well. And it's never going to be perfect. It doesn't matter what company, big, small team, people are going to be people, as we are. And we're always going to kind of maybe venture off the path that we're best fit. But I do like looking at it like that. So
No, it's awesome, and I really want to hit on that third thing that you mentioned on like relationships, etc. I always tell people, especially at work or in life in general, right? Like it's just like relationships matter. I don't think that people put in a lot of thought or metric on that, right? Like so even in work, a lot of people look at something infinite as finite, like just like they look at like fiscal years instead of the entire like lifetime. So when it comes to work, there's a bunch of people, and again, just for folks that because we're on theme, the people that are get shit done type people, they're like the type of like people that would just like do whatever it takes. They see a goal, they're going to go through it, and they're going to plow through everyone that is in the way. And that's like the type of person that you have to think about that in an organization. It's just like, are you promoting toxicity? Are you like allowing that to happen as a leader? So sometimes you may have your strongest contributor, but you have to ask the question, well, how did this person get here? Like, how many dead bodies are behind this person as they like reach the goal? Because that is something detrimental, right, to an organization. So if you think about like just fraud fighting in general, right, like if you're in a team and you're like trying to do fraud fighting in your organization, and outside of the fact that fraud fighting is already hard and tough, and so think about like frontline agents, let's say, or a contact center agent, it's already one of like the toughest jobs in the world because number one, you're supposed to service someone with a very small amount of time because that's how you're getting scored. And at the same time, you have to look behind you and make sure that it's not a fraudster.
Yeah.
So it's just like, again, if someone's telling you to run right while looking left, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
So the thing that, I'm telling people, so then now imagine added the psychological stress of like you're dealing with a person, like in your job that's like just trying to plow through you, or a leader that's just like horrible, that's just like not giving you breaks or anything like that. Like it absolutely hits the metric of how successful fraud fighting is in your organization.
I remember working on the phones, and you pissed off customers because the good orders were canceled, but you missed a fraud in another situation. And it was like, and that's where fraud ops in particular, we got to lift those folks up, and we got to find ways in any roles, but to upskill people, keep them motivated, keep them inspired. Because, in the early days or the, operations, it can be a grind, right? And it's always a grind, and it's always hard, just different levels. Like I said, if you're an executive, you're owning certain amounts of responsibility, and you're taking lots of blowback from very senior level people if it doesn't go well. So no job is easy. So to that point, lifting each other up and collaborating, and not, stepping on each other to kind of, like you said, to throw the bodies to the side to get where you need to get to. The less of that, the better. And with Fraud Fight Club, we try to say, leave your ego at the door. Like, I mean, you don't report to me, I don't report to you. So it's easier for me to say that, to just come in. I don't care if you're SVP, EVP, or CEO of the company. Like, let's share, let's be respectful, let's be honest, and let's kind of get to the more human level of this, which is we're all trying to achieve a very similar objective. We hold different titles. We're good at different things, but there's no reason to kind of make it stuffy and corporate and egocentric.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting too, because I always tell folks, a lot of like leaders, right? They always like say, "Hey, how do I get the most out of my people?" Right? And what they do is they squeeze. Right. And one of the things I keep telling folks is just like, that's not necessarily the best thing. Now, number one, you kind of have to understand, part of like a generational analysis, right? Like what motivates a particular generation. What used to motivate boomers might not be the same for Gen Zs, right? Like the corner office is not a shiny to a person who's like all about their life, right? Like, so the one piece too that I tell folks, and I'll use myself as an example, like, it all really depends on the environment of what version of a worker you're going to get. So again, for me, I love to, kind of innovate. I love to, really push new ideas, like create and maximize efficiencies. Like, I think for the most part in any organization, no one wakes up, right? Like, how do I like just screw everything up? Like no one ever wakes up and like says that, right? Like, so if that's the output, obviously something went wrong. So the example that I'm going to give, right, like, is that I've worked for two different organizations. Well, I've worked for multiple organizations, but two specifically like kind of come into mind. One organization, I'm literally driven and being told, here are the metrics you're supposed to give, and you're supposed to do this every day, and you're supposed to tell me exactly this. And it's just like very prescribed.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not doing anything outside of that. Anything that you're doing outside of that, like it's just like is like you not doing your job. And then I'm on like a different organization, different environment, where they're just like every single day, it's just like a tap on the shoulder and be like, hey, and it doesn't matter which manager it was. It was just a manager. Anyone who's a leader, anyone who's an executive would always tap you on the shoulder and introduce themselves. Like as if you're the more important person than them.
Yeah.
And they will always like tell you like, hey, like, very nice to see you. Is there anything I can do to help? Like with anything that you're doing right now, is there anything that I can do to help? And every single time, like, you go up to them and like provide an idea, even though it has nothing to do with your job, even though it has nothing to do with your job or your job description, who you are. And as long as it's good for the company, they applaud you for it, right? And they go into like a meeting saying, hey, Miguel brought this idea, amazing. Where in the other organization, it's just like, no, if you bring me an idea that's not related to your job, like you're going to get punished.
Yeah.
So the environment kind of like creates like two different employees from the same person, right? Like in the other environment where they're like telling me, hey, you just need to do this. Guess what? Like I'm not contributing anything more than what they're telling me.
Than what you're asked to do.
Yeah, exactly. And also at the same time, I'm just keeping my head down so I don't get in trouble, because the only thing above like the line is punishment.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So to me, I'm just like, no, I'm just going to take my paycheck. This is a good paycheck. I'm just going to take my paycheck and I'm going to go on my merry way. And I was doing a whole bunch of things on the side that I know could have like helped the efficiency of that organization. But guess what? I didn't share it because I know I'm only going to get punished for my hard work.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting how you balance the flexibility to do those things with the reality of there's certain numbers to hit and metrics, and you have to deliver that and outline it while empowering folks to go above and beyond, do different things, and feel like they can do that. And every role is different, right? Like, if you're an engineer and you're working on a project and you need to do certain things, and you can't just be coming up with some creative thing and going off on the side and being like, oh, my bad, that product's not going to launch, guys, my bad. But I think, like most things, the middle road is usually probably a balance of those things. It doesn't have to be always super rigid or always super flexible and creative, depending on the department. And I think, to your point, the people, it takes a certain level of emotional intelligence and judgment, and kind of like, what are we doing now versus what are we doing in a critical time this quarter, to say, hey, we got to buckle down for these 2 weeks to do this. And then we're just going to kind of be a little bit more in innovation mode or whatever it is. So
treated, right? Like, especially in like fraud ops or anything like that, right? It's not an easy job. That's kind of like the thing. It's just like, if you want to truly maximize your folks, especially when it comes to fraud or fraud prevention or like whatever it is that you're doing, I look at it as the entire organization is responsible for their security. How well connected are the people? Like, do people like going to the security team? Do the people like going to the fraud team, or do they feel like they're just going to get punished, right? Like towards the end. So that's kind of like the thing that, I tell folks too, is like, I think in every organization, you have to create that like fraud fighting community as well. And it can't just be, oh, if you're in the fraud department, then you're the only ones fighting fraud. No, it's an organizational responsibility.
So as I predicted when we were talking before, the questions, I'm way behind all those, because we get into interesting things. You say something, I get excited about it, and I, vice versa. So I'm going to jump to, so we have a sponsor of today's video, Somos, and Somos, focuses in the telecom space, understanding identity management, identity verification, accurate dialing, and kind of basically fraud prevention and other elements across the telecom ecosystem. So I'm curious, in your view, the phone number, telecommunications, just where you see that as a fraud vulnerability going forward.
Oh my gosh. So one of like the things that I tell people, PJ, is that, in 26, 27, I really see a lot of the physical channels getting hit, right? Like, because a lot of the, like, if you kind of see like all the things that are for sale and what folks are doing in the dark web into fraudulent activity, one of the things that you'll see is it's directed towards like physical channels, and channels that there's more human activity than there is automation, like in the digital channels. So one of the things I tell folks is, number one, your phone number, you should treat that like your social security number. If you look at Venmo, if you look at PayPal, right, like you can log in using your phone number. So if you kind of just like expose your phone number out there, like especially you're a person, let's say you're starting your own business and you haven't created your own LLC, you haven't grabbed a business phone number or something like that, and you're using your personal phone number and you plaster that on a website. Right? So everyone can grab that. Like, that's literally your social security number. Like that is probably your login for Venmo, PayPal, or like a bunch of like other applications, right? That's number one. So number one, please do not expose your phone number in the internet. Number two, and this is like going to like corporate strategy, et cetera. Like when it comes to some of like the folks there, I know of certain credit unions, right? Like where they're they have a 1-800 number that goes to the main contact center for the credit union because you might have a problem with your account. So they have this like centralized call center, et cetera. But their branches, are not connected into that centralized call center. It's just like these individual ad hoc things. So from a corporate strategy perspective, it's extremely important that you start centralizing those numbers, because if you look at it from, all these people just relying on caller ID to identify, is this person calling from the phone number that they're calling with? Your caller ID is not going to be able to determine whether something has just been recently ported.
Yes.
So those are like the type of things where, if you're looking at like the vulnerability of your organization, etc., you have to like really truly identify what is your telecom game, right? Like how are you like protecting and using and utilizing and validating phone numbers, in your organization? Is it, are there any loopholes? Are there like any like back channels where a phone number can just kind of like exist unchecked, and then people are doing account servicing, etc. So I tell folks, like number one, you just gotta treat that phone number like gold, because in contact centers, etc., when they call, like a lot of the automated systems do rely on the phone number, just calling, just making sure doing that, and a lot of like fraudsters use that for, that's like when they do their recon. Like a lot of like folks just kind of like run the phone numbers, et cetera, and then they start like calling, they start like spoofing phone numbers, and then just figure out what catches, because for the most part, sometimes when that automation unit, or like the call it like the welcome to X bank, and like please enter your PIN, or like whatever. But the thing is that sometimes the interaction is different when you're calling from a non-customer number to a customer number, right? So just like in the digital strategy of, like telling someone, hey, you inputted the wrong password. Don't tell them you inputted the wrong password because you told them that the username is correct, right? Like, so that's another strategy, is like, don't immediately disclose to a fraudster that, hey, this is a correct number.
Yeah.
Call it like the automation system is different when you are using a correct number.
Yeah. So the processes and how they handle some of the telecommunication inbounds or even outbounds, the data around the phone number, what you know about it ahead of, besides just caller ID, right? And then, working with partners or working collaboratively with mobile network operators and telecommunications, obviously the scams end in the lap often of FIs, because that's where the money leaves. One of the things we're talking about Fraud Fight Club is what role does Telecom have? And I know FIs are like, they have a role. Come on, you guys have a role too. And not even just from a liability standpoint, just from a how do we bridge this gap, right? Because everyone, different goals, different organizations, but still trying to keep people safe from scams, no matter where they start. And it's not just telecom, it's social. There's lots of other places you can jump, but I think telecom is, when you look at the phone calls into the contact centers that are scams and fraud, the calls we're getting to be scammed and defrauded, there's just so much opportunity for improvement there. And instead of pointing fingers, let's try and figure out better tech, better data, better people and ways to go about protecting these areas. So I'm going to jump forward to, you haven't worked in fraud your whole career. You've been very technology interested your whole career, and innovative. But I guess from the first time you started working with fraud fighters, however you say that, a data scientist, an ops person, an executive, what do you like most about working with fraud fighters?
So to me, it's really more the impact. Like I'd say, like, that when you're working with a fraud fighter, that there's just immediate impact with like the work that they are doing. And if you're a part of that that the work that you're doing today is also very impactful, right? Again, going back to the story of like in 2020 when I was working in TD, I remember like I really had very heavy interaction with the cybersecurity team, fraud team, et cetera, like really helping prevent fraud, making sure that we protected the money of the bank, but also for our clients and their accounts from being account takeover, et cetera. It felt good, right? Like it felt good doing something good.
Yeah.
So When when I first interacted with those folks, I always thought in my head, like the next opportunity I get to take like call it like a fraud prevention or a fraud fighter opportunity, I would. And I always like dabbled in my head, like, oh, if I did though, like would that like put me in a bucket where I get like tunnel vision and it's just like, do I become part of the problem? It's just like in Batman, right? Like where essentially like Aaron Eckhart's character just kind of says like, oh, Batman doesn't want to be Batman forever. It's just like, like eventually the hero becomes a villain. I didn't want to be like in a space too long that I start becoming the problem because I'm saying no to like some of the productive things that we can do, like, in whatever digital platform that we're in. So to me, I always wanted to make sure that, oh, if I ever walked into, well, I think first I'm going to step backward. After like we did that, right, I started seeing the value of a security first mindset, even though you are not within the fraud team. So I think it's the first time, like truly, I always knew that, oh, you're supposed to always have that security first mindset.
Yeah.
But it was like the first time that it really clicked in my head that I actively just like truly became like an evangelist for our fraud team when I was like in TD. And then moving to KeyBank, the opportunity for me to become the head of client identity verification and authentication, I absolutely took that as an honor and like something that I was like very proud of because it's something that I knew that every single line that I saw that we prevented a account takeover or anything like that, I never really viewed that as something for the bank, right? I viewed that as, oh, that's my dad, that's my sisters, that's
Yeah.
my brother, that's someone else's brother, someone else's father, right? Like, it's just like, to me, I always humanized, like those metrics that we were like looking at. And sure, like I still talk like an executive and like did like, the things that I needed to. But
Yeah.
on the side, I was also educating people like, hey, let's not look at this as only a number or a dollar sign. Let's look at this as people that we've also saved. Because as you know, PJ, and we've seen this in our experience in fraud fighting, it's just like dollars lost sometimes is the least concern. There are people that take their lives like because they've lost everything,
Yeah.
and it's a horrible thing. So to me, that's kind of like the thing. So it's like working with fraud fighters, to me, like I'm very happy to be part of this group because I always looked at, being positioned as a fraud fighter, like as a badge of honor and something that you carry with prestige.
Yeah. And I think to a degree, we all know we have a business to work for and a job to do and a family to raise or a pet to take care, whatever it is, right? We have our lives and that's realistic. But then you have this more tangible purpose behind it. You can see and that usually motivates you. Sometimes it's harder depending on what role you're in to see the end. If you're, sometimes when you're too far away from it and you're driving revenue or you're looking, you're crunching numbers, you can lose touch with that a little bit, but in the end, there is that thing you can connect to, which I think has a shadow side too. It drives you, but I hear from a lot of people in the industry, and I'm very sensitive to raising awareness around mental health. Is what you're exposed to, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
see and hear the darker sides of society. And you mentioned, we might not even see the worst of the worst, in maybe the country we live versus others, but folks who dig into some of the more hard to take fraud cases do see some pretty bad stuff, right? And they see, even if it's just moral frustration of first party fraudsters just using COVID relief money to live a lavish lifestyle. It's like, oh, is this where we're at right now with society? Like, it's just,
It is. This
it's
is like,
whatever. If it's, hopefully it's not psychologically damaging to the folks who are fighting fraud, and if it is, they giving them the support and the space to work there. But at the very least, it's draining, and it's draining because it's hard, and it's also draining because it's frustrating. It's kind of like, are you serious? Like, you're doing this now? Because there's always the ways to do it, and to be fair, you're staying on the right side of that, and you, as a human, you can look at it and be like, well, that guy's got $2 million and for some reason isn't even close to going to jail. And
mm-hmm.
you could be clawing for your next, whatever $1,000 raise. And that's just keeping that real. And so what do you do? Right. Like, I think the folks that forge ahead and use that passion and realize that the money, all the other stuff is not ultimately going to make you happy in the end. Like, the purpose that you have in this world will, and managing the frustrations and managing the mental health and going through that is part of the journey. But when you kind of hang up whatever you hang up when you're done fraud fighting, but whenever you do that, you can feel more proud of what you put back into this world, and during that process, having a community to lift you up, right? Because that's not. Don't be ashamed of that. That's we're not machines. Just like executives who are managing a million different things and tons of pressure, like they're humans too, right? No matter how robotic certain people can be, and take emotions out of it, et cetera, et cetera. We got to lift each other up in those situations. So that's what we want to help out.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like for folks that are listening right now, right? Like, one message I'll put out there is, yeah, like you're not alone, right? Like there's a whole bunch of fraud fighters out there that sometimes do get that like emotional and mental fatigue that PJ's like talking about. And if you're one of them, and if you're listening to this, honestly, reach out to my LinkedIn, like hit me up, DM me, and PJ knows this. Like again, like I'm always open to talk. And even if we don't have to talk about the subject matter that you do not want to talk about, we don't have to talk about that. I can be a distraction for you.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is, like really keeping the torch lit. You're
for the long run, right? Like you can flame up and do great work in a year, but if you're not there for the long stretch, you're not as good to the fight. You're not as good to yourself, family, dog, whatever you got.
Absolutely, yeah. Because we need you. Like that's the thing I tell people. It's like we need fraud fighters, and it doesn't matter whether like you've worked in fraud or not. As long as you've got the interest, like we'll show you how.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, let's wrap up. I asked the same question to every guest, kind of based off of how this interview series was named, but like fraud fight back interviews. So fraud is hard. We've outlined many ways of that. It's intriguing. It's interesting. So that might be the reason that keeps you in. But what keeps you kind of fighting back amidst kind of a really challenging area?
To me, one of my biggest motivators is my kid, like PJ. Like I've always talked to you about my son. Like he's 5 years old. I really want to be able to create a safer place for him. Right? Like, so to me, also understanding that there are a bunch of other people there with kids. I think part of like the thing that, is always something, again, like war isn't something that I glorify or should be glorified. But the thing is, it's just like back in the day, back in the Roman days, right? Like people were soldier citizens, right? When it's time to fight, when it's time to fight back, like people put on their armor, wore the swords, wore the shields, and they wielded the tools they needed to fight back. And not because they needed to protect their family, but because they needed to protect all of Rome, right? Like, so to me, that is something that keeps me consistently going is that, number one, I look at my son and imagine all the other kids out there and all the parents and all the, again, I was talking about my dad, like, before my dad passed away, it's just like, we always talked about like the efforts in fraud fighting, so to me, just really understanding that, when we go out there and we do our thing on fraud fighting, it's not just about our families, but all the families and communities that surrounding us.
I love it. And the first thing you see when you go to your LinkedIn page, I think, is your late dad and your son. So I think when I first saw that, I was like, all right, I think I kind of like this guy. And then I talked to you and I was like, all right, I really like this guy. So, hey man, good talking to you. Could always do it. So I'm sure we'll do it a lot more. I'll see you at Fraud Fight Club.
Oh yeah. Can't wait. Yeah. For folks that are listening, if you're not registered for Fraud Fight Club, please register. I mean, like it's such an awesome event.
I didn't ask him to do that. Or
I know. But you can slip like later.
No, it's the learning, the connecting with other people. I would say that's probably that's because let's think about all the things we can remember in 2 days. And, sure, I hope you get some light bulb ideas, and I hope we we hit those, but the people, because those are your lifelines. Those are the people that you can phone a friend. Those are the people that you might work for one day. Those are the people you might hire one day. And those are also the people that beyond, the numbers, facts, figures can lift you up when and you develop some good fraud fighting friends. Like it's, maybe not like your best buddy from when you were 5, but actually it might be better because you might not even know your best buddy from when you were 5. So anyways, good talking, Miguel. And I look forward to seeing you in person.
Same, man. Thanks so much again for having me.